Welcome to the Intuitive Therapist Podcast with Janis Cohen, therapist, clairvoyant, empath, and medium. Listen in as she takes a no-nonsense deep dive into real human struggles and how to resolve them. Janis will share channeled information from her spirit guide team, as well as the angels and archangels, to help you master your emotional, physical, financial, and spiritual destiny. And now, Janis Cohen.
Hey y'all, this is Janis Cohen, the Intuitive Therapist here on the Intuitive Therapist Podcast. Today I am really excited to have a very dear friend showing up today to help me with today's podcast episode. And we're going to talk about something that has become near and dear to my heart, which is being in midlife, focusing on ourselves and our health. And, there's so much that happens in midlife, especially for us women. And, we think that life is supposed to get easier in midlife. And the truth is, it does in certain respects where our boundaries shift, our values kind of shift, and we shift into this new version of who we are. And then there are the flip side, which is the hot side of the pillow, where we got to deal with all these changes and transitions and identities and all of this. And so really my goal and intention, as y'all have heard me talk about midlife and being a woman in midlife, is to be able to help you put the puzzle pieces together. And the reason why I'm excited about this episode today is because I just told Holly this, y'all, before we recorded, that I'm going to pick her brain because selfishly, I do have some questions about kind of this comeback concept. And let me tell you a little bit about Holly. Holly Bertone is a former FBI Chief of Staff for Counterintelligence turned certified holistic health coach. How cool is that? And she helps women in midlife find the clues to prioritize their health so their high achievement lifestyle no longer clashes with unwanted weight gain, lack of energy, and restless nights. Y'all know women, y'all are in perimenopause or menopause. We experience this. Holly spent 20 years in project management consulting and federal government service. After her own experience of breast cancer, healing herself from an autoimmune disease, and creating a no-conflict divorce, she learned that there's way more to life than burning the candle at both ends and living according to everybody else's agenda. Amen. So, as a certified holistic health coach, she helps women combine the principles of high performance and mindset to ditch diet culture and create sustainable results, y'all, that are an effortless part of their lifestyle. She is also a keynote speaker, and go ahead and listen to her podcast called Your Midlife Comeback Story Podcast. So, Holly, welcome.
Janis, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm excited to connect with you and connect with all your listeners.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy for you to be here because, like I said, I'm going to pick your brain. And you have this framework, this 5-step Rocky-inspired framework to shift the listener's perspective so that they can have clarity and confidence to create their comeback story for their health. We're going to get into that in a minute. But I was quite intrigued, as I'm sure everybody is, when you hear that first line of introduction, which is, you were a former FBI Chief of Staff for Counterintelligence. What in the heck? Talk to me about that. It seems so cool, right? And then you make this like big right turn. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, there is a lot to unpack with this one. So just stay with me here. And I'm actually going to take a quick detour back to when I was about 10 years old. And you said the magic word when you were doing the introduction. That is the word puzzle.
Yeah.
I have been a puzzler since I was a little girl. I actually went to a competition this past weekend, won second place.
Woo! Way to go.
Right? Like this is the through line, is putting those puzzles together. Well, when I was 10 years old, I thought that putting a 1,000-piece puzzle together was too easy. So we had this huge dining room table, and I would take 3 different 1,000-piece puzzles, put them on the table, mix them up, and then put them back together.
Get out.
Yeah, I was like elementary school, middle school, right? Nerd alert. This is how and I know you as a therapist, this is how my brain works. I like to take messy things and put the pieces back together and
Yeah.
make order out of the chaos and turn that message into that message. Well, fast forward, it was my lifelong dream to work at the FBI. And so post 9/11, I got my security clearance. One of my old managers reached out to me and he's like, "Hey," I was doing some consulting for Booz Allen Hamilton at the time. One of my old managers reached out to me and he's like, "Hey, we've got this opening down at FBI Quantico. Do you want to come join the team?" I'm like, yes. I'll be there in 45 minutes. Was about the drive.
Wow.
So yeah, so this was post 9/11 and I was on the project management side. So I wasn't an agent. I didn't do the stuff that they show on the TV shows, which is like way Hollywoodized anyway. But on the project management side. So this was back, and you remember post 9/11,
Yeah.
and they had the WMD commission report and the 9/11 commission report that came out from Congress. And
Mm.
basically they told the FBI and the other agencies that y'all don't talk to each other, and your internal systems and processes, you don't talk to your own selves. So this is where I came in from the project management perspective. And I ended up doing, I think it was like 4 or 5 different program offices that were under the national security space. And I would take these disparate pieces. And you got to remember, this is, the internet was still pretty new. We were still trying to figure out these, databases and systems, and everything was clunky. And you talk about government back then, that was really clunky
Right.
and archaic. you know, so yeah, so we take all these, the databases and the organizational pieces, and try to figure out, based on the recommendations from Congress, what made sense for the FBI to kind of put themselves back together under that national security umbrella. And I guess I did a good job, because they then brought me on as the chief of staff for the FBI's counterintelligence program management office.
Wow.
So I was in charge of all of their project management projects and
Yeah.
all of the data analysis. So again, the through line of taking all the puzzle pieces, dumping them on the table, mixing them up, and then putting them back together. But here's where things kind of took a turn, mostly for the worse. It ended up being for the better, but we're just going to start with the worst.
Sure.
Was in 2010, this was on my 39th birthday, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I went through surgery, chemo, and radiation.
Ooh.
And then 1 year later, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. And that was a Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which then turned into years of additional health challenges, to the point where in 2017, I was actually, I had to resign because my health I just couldn't
Wow.
work anymore. And here's where this gets interesting. And this is going to tie back into, the health aspect of this,
Mm.
is that in my 30s, I was a competitive mountain bike racer. I had this like drive with this with my career, and as a competitive mountain bike racer. Believe it or not, I know this sounds crazy. Like, you stand on a podium, they give you medals when you like, almost like the Olympics. It's just
Yeah.
this
Sure.
amateur race. They give you like a medal or a trophy or a pint glass or whatever. And I thought that because I was a competitive athlete, because I weighed 110 pounds, that I was the epitome of health.
Mm.
And not just that, but go back a few years, in my 20s, I was actually about 40, 50 pounds overweight. And, I did all the stuff, and the Dexatrib, and,
Oh my
nothing
God, I
really.
remember that.
Oh God, remember Dexatrib?
Oh, remember Dexatrim, the red
Yeah.
pill. Yes.
But nothing helped. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I'm just supposed to be a little on the chubby side. Maybe that's just how I'm built. Maybe, my thighs are just destined to rub together every single day. Like, I just kind of thought that this is how it was supposed to be. And at that time too, I hadn't really come into myself in my 20s. The self-esteem was still just in the toilet.
Yep. Yep.
And what was interesting was, when I was in my 30s and I was racing and I was, had six-pack abs, I still wasn't happy. Like, I
Mm.
still didn't have, so it wasn't an appearance thing. It wasn't a weight thing. I was like, okay, there's something else going on here. Because even though I was a lot thinner, that self-esteem, that happiness, that value, internal value, it wasn't there. And I sought all of the external things. I sought value from my career. I sought value from food
Yeah.
and a lot of emotional eating there. And realized with these diagnoses over time is that true health is not the absence of disease.
Mm.
And there's a lot more to unpack. There's a lot more to health than the number on this scale. And what I find is that women, and especially women in midlife, we chase that number on the scale. Things aren't working the way that they used to. We can't eat the same thing. We're gaining weight instead of losing weight. We can't restrict the
Exactly.
calories and we're not losing weight. We can't jump on cardio for hours at a time. We're not losing weight. And these things aren't working. So that's what I do as a holistic health coach is, take these years of experience, take the analytical brain of dumping all the pieces out and putting them back together and getting to that root cause. Because weight loss isn't about weight loss. There's a lot of other factors that we need to look at. And
What are
that's where I
what
come
are
in.
some of the other factors? Because I know for me, I'm very transparent on my podcast. People know I'm 55, and uh, like you said, the things that I did in my 20s and 30s and even 40s, early 40s to mid 40s, worked like a charm. I walk or I'd eat healthy or I whatever restrict or whatever it was, and the pounds would just drop off. And then I got to a point where in my late 40s, it was like the same, this is not working. This is not working. And then on top of that, um, being in my 50s, my mid 50s, it's like nothing that I did before is working. And the weight that I have gained, right? Um, I keep it, and I may lose the same 2 or 3 pounds, and then that's it. It's like things don't budge, and it's been a mystery to me. So I'd love for you to get into, if you could, what are these pieces? What are these additional pieces that are involved that we don't know about? I mean, are we talking gut health? Are we talking mindset and gut health? Like, what are we talking about here?
It's a little bit of everything, and it's different
Okay.
for everyone, but all of the pieces are important. And almost like back to my cancer diagnosis, it wasn't just one thing that caused the
Yeah.
cancer. It was a lot of different pieces that kind of come together. So I like to get to that root cause, and I like to, to swim a little bit backwards and say, okay, what got us here in the first place? So, the first place I'm always going to go to is, nutrition and lifestyle factors. And, is number one, how clean is the diet? Are we eliminating processed foods and sugar and things like that? But then on the flip side of that is that, and especially this range in midlife, is that we're actually starving ourselves. So, and it's almost like I see this the day in the life on repeat. It's 2 eggs for breakfast in the morning because 2 eggs are supposed to be high in protein, or like an English muffin or something light, and then coffee, of course. And then lunch is like a big salad and then something else. And then there's always snacks in the middle, because we get hungry and,
Yes.
the energy crashes. And then dinner is usually some kind of like a chicken or a fish or a lean meat. And then usually like some broccoli
Veggies.
or a
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
vegetable, and then
You
maybe a
just
little bit of
described
rice.
my diet, the way I eat. I'm a pescatarian anyway, so I kind of eat that way, even though I have eggs and fish, but I am.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I'm like, holy moly, you have just described mostly my way of eating.
Yeah.
And
But that's
maybe
but that's the thing, that's how we were brought up. Like that's what we
yeah.
were told is a
We're still
healthy.
told now, though, which is,
Right.
if you want to lose weight, even in midlife, it's like you need to have your ideal weight in, or no, you're supposed to have, what is it? How many 70 to 90 grams of protein for the day, and drink your ideal weight in water, and always have a significant amount of protein and then vegetables. And so why doesn't that work? Like, what is it? Is it the cortisol piece? Is it the the shift in metabolism, and how do you fix that without going on these stupid shots like Ozempic that really destroy your muscles, right? So
Right.
it feels like a trap. I know. And y'all, I'm having my own therapy right now. So just chill out. I know many women who are going to listen to this who are experiencing the same thing as me. So I am going to take advantage of our time.
Oh,
So how do we
absolutely.
solve
So yeah,
this?
so
You know?
the nutrition
Yeah.
is just a small piece. Or I
Yes.
shouldn't say a small piece. It's a big piece, but it is just one piece.
Sure. Sure. Sure.
And what we've been told, and typically the advice is 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of weight. So the advice that's out there is actually 50 to 60 grams of protein per for your body weight.
Okay.
But this is about half of what we need. So all of the new recommendations that have been coming out over the last few years, it is 1 gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight. So let's say you want to weigh 125 pounds, you're looking at 125 grams of protein. The other thing is fat. We've been conditioned in the 80s and 90s with this low fat. And I'm talking, the good fats, the avocados, the fish, the nuts, the even the fatty steaks, and these are the good fats that you want. And fat is subjective. I teach individualized wellness in my program. A lot of people, a lot of programs have very specific ratios, and it's different for everyone.
Yeah.
So, but what I found is that in midlife, and especially for midlife women, we need more protein and we need more fat. We
Mm,
need more fat than we've been eating. So,
got it.
so nutrition, and I say diet, not on a diet, but diet as
Yeah.
nutrition, is a big piece of it. Cortisol is another big piece of it. Now, if you were to put cortisol, if you were to put stress and nutrition up against each other, stress is going to win all the time. So
Yep.
you can be eating clean, you can be eating healthy, you can be doing
Yep.
quote unquote all the right things. And if you're living that burned out, stressed out, go 100 miles an hour kind of lifestyle without putting the brakes on, and that cortisol is increased, your inflammation's increased, that is going to cause you to, it's going to put the fat stores on. So it's
Sure.
either going to cause you to keep that weight or even gain weight,
Yeah.
even if you're eating clean, even if you're exercising.
Right.
So yeah, so
And also
stress is going to win all the time.
the lack of sleep. It's like, don't we, when we sleep, don't we kind of balance out our cortisol if we get good sleep? Now, I know
And
so many
that's the other
women who are
piece of
like,
it. Yeah.
yeah, good sleep, right? For me, I tend to maybe get 5 hours of sleep. Don't know if it's deep sleep, but I take natural supplements and stuff, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. So that's another key piece too. And I'm sure in your program you go into all of that, and there are a lot of components. And
Yeah.
and I
Yeah,
how
and sleep is huge, because if you don't get a good night's sleep, what happens is you're going to be craving sugar the next day. You're going to be craving those carbs, those processed foods.
yeah,
And it's going to be a lot easier when you're cranky and you're a little hangry, and your blood sugar's kind of spiking all over the place. You're like, just
fuck
give
it,
me comfort food. Right.
fuck it, give me that food.
And if
Yes,
you don't have that energy from a good night's sleep, you're also not going to want to move your body. So like I said, it's everything. As a
yes,
holistic health coach, I don't like to compartmentalize. I do look at
yeah,
everything. It is
yeah.
it is all important. Yeah.
I
And then
love
the
it.
other big piece of it is, and I know you're gonna just totally geek out over this too, is looking at our past, looking at what got us to this place, looking
Mm,
at those patterns of what, the stories, the habits, the beliefs, the patterns. you know are you a reward eater? Oh my goodness, I just put in 10 hours today at work, the boss made me stay late, I'm tired, I had a hard day at work, I don't feel like cooking, I am just going to stop at Chick-fil-A on the way home and get some fast food, or I'm just going to order DoorDash for the family,
ah,
right? Because I need to reward myself, like I worked hard, I deserve to have a night off from cooking. And that's great if that's a once in a while thing, but if
yes,
it's a kind of a consistent thing. So reward eating, stress eating, emotional eating, and we go to those places. So if the nutrition is, you actually should be about 4 to 5 hours in between meals without that kind of crash. So you don't you want that blood sugar to be stable.
right.
So if you're getting hungry, before 4 hours, like, so you eat and you get hungry and it's before 4 hours, you need to adjust your protein and your fats because you're not getting enough nutrients in that meal.
That's good to know.
So
That's
yeah.
awesome. Beautiful, beautiful. And I am sure that you go into detail into helping people kind of diagnose and understand what kind of eater they are. And I mean, my feeling is intuitively, your program is amazing. So
Oh,
y'all,
thank
when
you.
we finish this, I'm going to give you all of her contact information. So we will get there. But um, what is
And
the
really when we talk about from, kind of the emotional perspective
yeah,
too, there's a lot of blocks that we have. And I've got a weight loss quiz, like, one of those like fun quizzes that they used to have on,
yeah,
was it the BuzzFeed or whatever, to look at your weight loss block, to actually kind of go back and say, what was my childhood look like? What is my inherent personality like? And what I found is that whatever is blocking us, whatever is sabotaging us, is also our superpower. And that's what I like to get into too, is because we can take, I mean, we are us. It is, I don't know if I have a coin around here, but we're the same person. So, the quote unquote bad stuff that's happened to us
yeah.
is and what we see as those negative stories and what sabotages us, we can turn that into the good, into our superpower. Like, we don't just become a different person and grab different skills out of the air. We take what we already have inside of us and we turn that around. And that's, I like to talk about, like my
I
podcast, your
love
midlife
this.
comeback story. Like, this is your
Oh,
midlife
yeah.
comeback,
Yeah.
is being able to take all this stuff that you already have and say, okay, let's turn this around. Let's create our superpower.
Beautiful. I love that because I talk a lot. I talk a lot about this concept of reframing with my clients, with my students, with my listeners, because I just want to offer this caveat and then kind of go up to this next question that I have for you. But everything in life is our teacher. And if we can look at that and we stop putting up our middle finger to life and saying, fuck you, life, screw you, life, for giving me such a hard life. Yeah, everything happens along a spectrum, right? Difficulty, joy, happiness, love, like everything's along a spectrum. It's how do you use that? How can you define who you are in a powerful way from the things that have happened to you in your life? And when you do that, there are no regrets because you're looking back at everything and you're like, oh, well, that was an initiation, and that was an initiation, and that was an initiation into this new level, new level, new level self, right? So I'm glad that you teach that. I think that's hugely important to be able to focus on how to flip the narrative, right? Because that if there's anything that is one of the most powerful forces, it's how you choose to use your mind and how you program your mind. And so, what is this when we talk about yo-yo dieting, right? We talked about the kind of the losing and the gaining. Um, you talk about that being like the base camp cycle. What are some of the kind of common mistakes that
Yeah.
we women go through when we're trying to quit the yo-yo dieting? I don't like the word dieting. I feel like if I can shift it into an eating plan, that feels more palatable for me. Um, so what are some of the common mistakes that people go through with yo-yo dieting?
Yeah, so let's first unpack some statistics.
Right.
Approximately 92% of diets fail. And that's important to know because we have an entire industry. And I'm glad you said I don't like the word diet. I like the word diet as a diet, not as a diet, right?
Yeah,
If
yeah,
that makes
yeah.
sense. But we literally have an industry that is set up, that is counting on you to diet and fail, diet and fail over and over again. A 92% failure rate. And two-thirds of women over the age of 40 are clinically overweight or obese. So we have a problem, and it's not just our hormones. Like, there's something going on. But we've also been brought up in the 80s and 90s with the diet culture, with the yo-yo diet, with let's just,
Yeah.
try whatever's out there.
So
And
much
also,
pressure
we've got
too.
our friends and we got social media. It's like, oh, I don't know who to listen to. And all the information is competing. So sometimes we kind of go into that freeze mode because we have so much information. Like, I don't even know where to start. I don't even know what to do. what happens so often is that when we do decide to say, okay, I am going to go on the set, and I call it the base camp cycle, because you think about, and I'm going to use old school, you think about going on a diet is like climbing the mountain, because you're like, oh my goodness, I've got 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds to lose. It's a big thing. So we're climbing the mountain, we're climbing Mount Everest. And what happens is that we start with where we're currently at. And we've got those negative beliefs and patterns and habits from the past that are driving us. Albert Einstein said that everything is created twice. It's first created in our minds and then it manifests
Mm.
physically. So if we're trying to create this future self, if we're trying to create ourself who is 20, 30, 40 pounds lighter, and we're creating it from the state that we're currently in, and we're still in that place where we've got the negative stories and emotions and anger and regret and fear and jealousy and worry and blame and shame and all these emotions, well, our future becomes what we feed it. So
Mm.
if we're feeding our future from a disempowering state, well, guess what it's going to look like? So that's two big mistakes I think I got in there.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
the other piece of it is that we only focus on the doing. Just tell me what I need to do. And we don't go back. We don't address what got us here in the first place. And then we also don't address this from a sustainability perspective, because the obstacles are going to happen. The obstacles are going to throw us off. So what
If you
happens is that we're climbing the mountain, and an obstacle happens and we're just like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to start on Monday. And then Monday never happens. So we are right back at the base camp of the mountain. So this is what I call the base camp cycle,
That's
because we do this cycle over and over and over again.
wow, I love that. You talk about sustainable, and I think that is something that if we women, and I'm sure there'll be some men listening to this, but we women, that is a key word for us, is to be able to sustain it, right? And so there has to be components that are appealing, that are manageable, that are applicable, that feed into our why, into our ultimate reason for wanting to really honor this vessel that we have. And it's one of those things where if you can shift into it not being you're fat and you're unacceptable to, you know what, I'm going to honor me, and I'm going to honor me in the ways that I'm called to honor myself, whether it's how I speak to myself, the words that I use, mindset, whether it's how I speak about my money, my life, my relationships, my vessel. Then it becomes something that I feel like is, for lack of a better term, more digestible and able to accept. And so you have a process in your program. It's a framework. It's the 5-step Rocky framework. And it sounds like this is an alternative to dealing with the yo-yo bullshit and all the self-condemnation and the self-loathing and all of that. And I would love for the listeners to hear about your framework.
Oh, I love getting into the Rocky inspired framework. And it was interesting because you actually had an episode recently where you were talking about your dad and the anthem, like
Song
the
My
life.
Way. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was thinking, I was like, my song, like my anthem, my life anthem was always Eye of the Tiger. In fact, it's like my
Ah,
ringtone on my phone. I'm like, that's always been my anthem. So
love
I
it.
just kind of funny, like I never put those two together. I just kind of find it funny that I picked the Rocky inspired
Ah,
framework.
fantastic.
So this is great. So R is what I call rear view mirror. And that's really honing in on what we've been talking about. That is when you get right with your past. We
Mm,
can't jump in our DeLorean and go back and change the past, but we can make peace with it and we can find forgiveness. And that's peace and forgiveness with the other person, with other situations. But most importantly, it is peace and forgiveness with yourself.
yes, amen.
And that is such a huge piece, because when you can break those tethers, when you understand the patterns of what got me here in the first place, and you can break those tethers of those patterns, that's going to help you to create this newer version of you who is looking at this from a different perspective and not starting from that place of disempowerment. So we go backwards before we go forwards. But again, this is something that traditional diets don't talk about or do. It's
Right.
just like,
Exactly
tell
right.
me the food to eat and the calories to eat. Like that's, so it's so much more complicated than that. And this is a huge piece of that sustainability factor. So that is R. O is, I like to say, own your ship with a P, like a boat. And this is personal responsibility. This one is huge, and this is not popular these days. And I'm sure you see this in your work as well, is that it is so easy to just kind of place the blame on everything else. And the other thing I see too is when we're in our 40s and 50s and beyond, like we're in this place where we've chased that quote unquote happiness. We've chased the career, we've chased the spouse, we've chased the kids, the house, the dogs, the great job, all the things. And we now have this stuff. We have this stuff that we said is going to make us happy.
Mm,
And we've completely given ourselves over, and we put all of our focus and attention on all of these external factors. And we look at these external factors for our validation. So what happens is that when we're not, we don't have the time to focus on ourselves, we don't have the time to focus on our health, it is so easy to blame all of these disparate pieces in our life that we wanted, that we said was going to make us happy. But isn't it their fault that we're not taking care of ourselves? Like we're putting their needs before our own. And it's subconscious. Like we don't even know we're doing it. And I think even just being aware, but responsibility is one of the hardest things, to
yeah.
look into
It
that
feels
mirror.
scary.
It
Sure.
is very scary. And and it was interesting. I realized the parallel of this framework when I was actually going through my divorce.
Mm,
And one of the first things that I did was look in the mirror and take that responsibility for myself in the marriage and myself in the divorce. And that completely changed how I showed up, which completely changed how he showed up. And we ended up having as amicable of a divorce as it can be. I mean, it's a divorce. It was still a rough situation,
yeah.
but but it completely changed how I show up. There was no blame, there was no resentment, there was no, all the emotions that come up from that. So this is how powerful this piece is, because it completely changed. You talk about the mindset, it completely changed
Mm,
how you show up. And you're like, okay, it doesn't matter. We've done the forgiveness. So it doesn't matter what got me to this place. I have agency over my
yeah.
life, over my health from this day forward. And that's a powerful place to operate from. So,
100%.
yeah, so that's O, own your ship. And then C is create your future self. And this is typically the one where, a lot of diet programs live in from the perspective of this is the doing. This is tell me what I need to do and I'm just going to go do it. Right.
Mm,
So, but I like to look at this from a different perspective, because it's not just about the doing, it's about your future self. And,
who you want to become.
right.
Yeah.
And not just who you want to become, but looking at this from the perspective of we're not getting any younger.
Mm,
We're going to blink and we're going to be in our 70s, our 80s, our 90s. So what we decide to do today, how we treat ourselves today is going to determine how we live, what our life is going to look like.
mhm.
So, do you want to be the woman who has to call everyone for help, or is in a home, or is not independent? Or do you want to be the one that's traveling everywhere and, the family calls and says, hey, we're going to the amusement park. You're like, I'm in, let's go. Do you want to be the one that can like lift the kitty litter from the trunk of the car and bring it into the house? Do you want to be the one that can like put stuff, up on a shelf? Pick up your dog and take your dog to the vet. Like these are important life skills that we need to have. Driving,
Sure.
these are, but we don't think of it. We don't think of it from this perspective. And I like to drive it home with this example, is that everyone's like, oh, I hate squats. I hate squats. Well, okay. Let's say you're 50 years old and you live to be 80 years old. So like 30, 35 years. In a span from this point forward until you die, we go to the bathroom on average, I don't know, 8 times a day. But then you add these older years and incontinence. So maybe a few more, but let's say 8 times a day. If you add 8 times a day times like 30, 35 years, you're looking at 100,000 squats for the rest of your life just by going to the bathroom. So you can complain about squats, but this is an important skill to have, to be able to get yourself up and, up and down off
Yeah.
the toilet.
Yeah.
So, so you can poo-poo the squats all you want, but it's an important skill to have. So thinking about it from the perspective of, I was just talking to a friend and she was like, oh my God, I just tripped over my dog. Okay, we're going to trip over our dogs in the kitchen. We're going to trip over our cats. Like when you fall, first of all, you don't want to trip and fall. You want to be able to have balance. So the tripping is going to equal some balance. It's going to be like, I did not fall. Or
Yeah.
that trip and fall, you don't want to break bones. So you want to have strong bones, you want to have a strong heart, you want to have metabolic health, you want to have good cardiovascular health, good bone health, good muscle health. All of these things are important. So it's not just, oh, I want to lose a few pounds. Oh, I just want this number on this scale. Oh, I just want to fit back into my jeans. And we need to think about this from a long-term perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for so many women, like the demands, the daily demands are so big. It's like, I can't think 15 minutes ahead, let alone 15 years.
Right.
But we have to, like, you have to, you're going to age. Like, put your head under the sand as
Girl,
much as you
I
want.
know.
Like,
I'm
we're going
5 years
to
away
age.
from 60. Trust me, I think about
Yeah.
that. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I consider myself a young woman and agile and mobile and all of that. And it's like, well, things I'm already seeing things change. So
Yeah.
I would be a fool to not believe what you're saying. And it makes
Yeah.
complete sense to be able to look ahead and say, no, it's not about just now. It's about how what quality of health you want so that when you age, you're still having a quality of life and you're
Yes.
still able to participate in it as fully as you would like to. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that. I love
So
that.
that's C, create your future self. K is keep the vision, not the view. And here's another big piece that not a lot of people are talking about when they talk about diets. They don't talk about the obstacles because they're going to be there 100% of the time. Every single day, plan on an obstacle happen. It's not big, it's small. You're stuck in traffic. Yesterday, I dropped a plate on the floor and it broke. And I have a dog and the tray had some meat on it. So I was like, had to get the dog into another room so he wasn't trying to lick up the meat and get shards in his mouth, and still make it to my Zoom meeting on time.
Yeah.
Like the obstacles happen. You get an argument with your spouse, or the kid's like, oh, I've got this last minute homework thing, or you got to work later. I mean, there's always going to be something. And what happens is that when you're in that high stressed out, that sympathetic stress state all of the time, and you're running from that adrenaline all of the time, and that obstacle hits, it's easier to say, oh, you know what? I'm just going to start on Monday. Oh, you know what? I'm just going to eat the bag of potato chips today. Oh, you know what? I'm just going to grab the ice cream. Oh, you know what? I'm just going to start my workout again on Monday, and back to that base camp cycle. So we really need, and we did this in counterintelligence at the FBI. It's called tripwires,
Mm,
and something that we incorporate in the program is setting up these tripwires so that you know what's coming up. Like
mm.
it's almost like you can anticipate. It's almost like you almost know what's going to happen, or you plan so that when things do happen, it doesn't bother you as much. And I'll give you the perfect example of this. I was flying to MIT. So I had a speaking engagement at MIT and then came back and I had a speaking engagement back in my hometown. So it was back to back. So I needed that flight to be like tight.
Yeah.
And I practiced what I preach. So I'm there. The flight's delayed 3 hours. And it was a 3 hour delay that they kept saying every 30 minutes. It's like, oh, it's going to be another 30 minutes.
Awful.
So
Awful.
I
Been
just,
there, done that.
so I just pulled up my laptop and started working.
Yeah.
But the psychologist in me is like, oh, I'm just going to observe human behavior because this is my playground. And
Love being at the
right,
airport and people watching. My
right.
favorite thing.
Oh my
Anyway, that's a
goodness.
whole nother
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah. So you've got the group of people that are screaming at the flight attendants because like there's nothing they can do. It's like, don't you understand? I've got somewhere important to go. We all have somewhere important to go, otherwise we wouldn't be getting on a plane. You've got the group of people that heads to Dunkin' Donuts and gets the donuts and the bagels and just eats. And this is like 8 o'clock in the morning. You've got the group of people that goes to the bar and starts drinking.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
so this is how we as a society, this is how we cope with stress.
Yeah.
We're trying to find that, okay, I've got this stress inside of me. I'm feeling this anxiety and this panic and this, all the things. And I need to do something. And it's either coming out verbally, or we're eating it, or we're drinking it. So those obstacles are going to happen every single day of our lives, big or small, it doesn't matter. So it's really learning how to really just coexist with that stress and with those obstacles, so that they don't hijack your life.
Yeah,
That is
without
huge.
doing something that undermines you.
Yeah.
Right, that's the thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and
that's
I love
huge, because once that's in place, you're like, okay, I got it. You know?
well, and then your brain starts to trust, we talk about how our brains work. It's like, your brain believes what you tell it. If you
Yeah.
tell your brain that you're not going to succeed and you're going to fail and you're a fuck up and you're nothing you do is working or will work, well, your brain's just going to believe that, and that's how your life is going to be. But if you're able to tell yourself, I've handled difficult things in the past, I can handle this, and you're already programmed for dealing with these obstacles, you're good to go. You're not going to sabotage yourself, right? So the last part of your framework.
Yeah, so this is why this has come back home to you, YOU. So that's the why. And this is like, circa Wizard of Oz, you've had this inside of you all along. Spoiler alert. But I like to think of it more from the perspective of, this is the ability to not rely on all of those external sources anymore. It's like you actually feel at home with yourself. And when you're at home and when you're regulated, it's a lot easier to eat healthier. It's a lot easier to exercise. It's a lot easier to embark on those healthier lifestyle factors. And it's a lot easier to keep this sustainable and to make it effortless. But it's also more than that, because I feel like, especially as women, we're going to entrain to someone else, or they're going to entrain to us. And I really prefer that someone entrains to my energy, that I'm not, drawing off of someone else. So to be able to stand in your power and to be that example. And the best example I have of this is, one of my students was trying to get her teenage daughter to exercise with her, just, in the living room. And the teenage
Yeah.
daughter was like, no, because teenagers. And she got into her power, and she just showed up and just started exercising. And then one day the teenager was there with her friend. You got to look cool with the friends. And they just were like, hey, can we exercise with you? And like, she didn't do anything. She didn't say anything. She just showed up in her own power. Like, it is subtle, but the shift is huge. And
Mm,
that's really what this is about, is that we get to be that example for our family, for our friends, for our coworkers, not forcing our lifestyle on anyone, but just being that example and being that light that people would say, I want what she has. How did you do
yeah.
it? How did you
Yeah.
get there?
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's our rear view mirror, own your ship, create your future self, keep the vision, not the view, and then come back home to you.
Oh, that's amazing. Y'all, I'm telling you, I hope you enjoyed today, because I sure did. And when I tell you there's so much more that you could learn from Holly, seriously. When we're going to give the contacts for your quiz and Instagram, how to reach out to you, and the podcast, and also your website. But are you running your program anytime soon?
Yes, yes, I have ongoing membership. So yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
that's fantastic, y'all! I'm telling you, be a part of Holly's world. Um, if you want to get right with yourself and be good with yourself, this is a fantastic way to do it in midlife. And so, thank you very, very, very much. What a pleasure to have you here. And let's. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be adding these links to the post. But if they want to get your quiz, how do they find your quiz?
Yeah, so probably the best place is say hello on Instagram, and there's a link for the quiz there. It's holly.bertone. So super easy to find me on Instagram. Or while you're listening to this podcast, just head over to your midlife comeback story, and it's, look for episode, write this down, 136. And it's how I use FBI inspired tactics to uncover your weight loss block. and there'll be information for the quiz there too.
Fantastic. And her name is spelled Holly. Last name is B as in boy, ERT as in Tom, ON as in Nancy, Holly Bertone. Well, thank you, Holly. Really, really appreciate you being here, and so happy to have had you as a guest, and wishing everybody a blessed day, a wonderful week, and as always, live intuitively.
Thanks for listening to The Intuitive Therapist. If you like what you heard, the best compliment you can give us is to share this podcast with a friend. And be sure to give us some stars and a favorable review at Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen in.